fact that you are here, you're in for a treat, as Ron Greer is going to share some words of wisdom with us as we're planning ahead for what is next on our plates. I wanted to recognize and first of all say thank you to the leadership team that's been helping me. We're calling ourselves Encore. If you have been a part of this conversation helping to get today launched, would you please stand for me? I know y'all are here. There's Steve in the back, Joel, there you are, Amanda, Jennifer. If y'all have any ideas of other topics like this that might be helpful to you, please let us know. We have one other thing planned. Oh, I've got the book in my arm. It's a read and reflection time. It will take place on Sunday, October the 19th, from 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. in the hospitality suite. We are going to read this book. Before you get there, read this book. It's Arthur Brooks, From Strength to Strength. This has been recommended to me multiple times as a helpful way to start planning and navigating how to live with purpose and meaning in your life post-career. So you'll read the book, then you'll come for a discussion. Dr. Steve McCullum is going to facilitate the discussion. He's going to talk about the overarching themes and then give time for reflection for everybody that participates. So I hope that you'll sign up for that. You may sign up for that on the website. Other ideas, we're planning for medical care, Medicaid, Medicare, insurance, financial taxes, Social Security planning, and finding community. Ways to get involved now, and I want to make a pitch for a new ministry that we are starting. Reverend Laurie Etheridge is an ordained deacon, and she is retired, and she has recently started coming to Peachtree Road. There she is. This is Laurie. Her children are here, so she's now worshiping with us. And she has experience in leading homebound visitation ministry. And what we're hoping to do is offer training and support for a team to go and serve our homebound community. And it is a dear way to have some really rich conversations with some fascinating people. And you're also offering community for them. When you're away, you're tucked away, you don't have the opportunity as much to make new friends. And this is kind of how I see it, as new friendships. We're having a meeting on September the 28th. That's a Sunday right after church in the hospitality suite. Lunch will be provided. And Lori's going to give us an overview and a vision of what that ministry looks like. And then we'll have a training in October, hoping to launch either, if not during Advent, then right after Christmas. So I hope that you'll be interested in coming to learn more about that. And now let's offer a blessing, and I'll turn this over to Ron Greer. Let's pray. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for your presence with us this day. We thank you for this food that we have received and ask your blessings on it, that it will nourish our bodies, and blessings on us that we might go forth to be a blessing to others. We give this time to you. Speak to our hearts. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Good afternoon. Let me begin with the words of two of my literary heroes. The first is poet Marian Oliver. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And the other is theologian Frederick Beaton, who wrote, one life on earth is all we get. And the obvious conclusion would seem to be, we are fools if we do not live it as fully and bravely and completely as possible. that sets the tone for our time together this afternoon. The seasons of our lives. We are about to arrive. Some already have arrived, but a new one. I have found in my life that the seasons have come in decades. Apart from vocation and family, seasons of my life, in my 40s, I spent my 40s, again, apart from vocation and family, I spent my 40s running marathons. I just absolutely loved it. I loved to run, and that was my distance of choice. Then that evolved into my 50s, and I traded in marathons for golf. What a change. From running distances to being, as I once heard someone express it, being engaged in a sport that you can actually gain weight while doing it. And it was a wonderful decade. Now, I found that my purpose is going to change, and my recreation is going to change as I move from decade to decade. But I started to, in my late 50s, I started to flirt with, do I want to go back? Do I want to go back to running marathons? And so I started running a little farther, and I remember on a Friday evening, I said to Karen, I'm going to get up early in the morning. I'm going to run 16 miles, that's you. I'm going to run 16 miles down by the river. And if that goes well, I'm going to sign up for the Music City Marathon in Nashville. I get back from my run. Karen's fixing her cup of tea for Saturday morning. She said, how'd it go? I said, it went well. I told her I had 2 revelations out there. Come on in. Number 1, I can still do this. Number 2, I don't want to. For everything, there is a season. And the season of doing that had transformed into the season of doing this. I became aware of my aging. My body wasn't what it once had been. And it was time to move on. Then back surgery meant I set the golf clubs aside. I spent my 60s doing a good bit of riding. And then my 70s have been a time of significant transition and change. And of course, the riding has continued. And now, I am on the threshold of my retirement, which will take place this coming spring. And I wonder, what will this new season bring? For everything there is a season, and a purpose, and a time for every purpose under heaven. And I wonder, for each of us, to what purpose will this new season open? Obviously, that's a rhetorical question. It takes time for discernment and reflection. As I look at the decades of my life, that's the big picture. Those are the big seasons. And within each of those seasons have been specific, more narrow chapters, for which in each of them I have felt a tug. I felt an urging, or perhaps an inspiration, or maybe even a call. The chapter on which we are focused today, of course, is the chapter of retirement. Some of us are approaching it, others have already arrived. How will you live your story in this chapter that begins now? To say the obvious, a major part of the retirement chapter is the freedom to choose. So much of what we have done up to now, life brought to us. So much of it was already defined by the previous life stages. We have been rearing children and doing our jobs. And now, We're empty nesters and unemployed. How will we handle our newfound freedom? I think of the story of the young minister, the young priest, and the elderly rabbi. They, every Monday morning, would get together for breakfast and compare notes over the weekend. And so on this one particular Monday morning, the young priest and the young minister got into this heated discussion about when life begins. And one, of course, said it began at conception. The other one said it begins at viability outside the womb, and they just went at it with each other. They were just fussing and arguing and debating. And finally, their argument was kind of spent, and there was a moment of silence. And the elderly rabbi said, you boys, you just don't get it. Life begins when the kids leave home and the dog dies. Well, the brother was close. A new phase of life begins when the children grown and we retire from our vacations. And I wish nothing but the best for the dog. And how do we handle our new freedom? I think the scriptures repeated use of the phrase, in the fullness of time. In the fullness of time always meant when the time is right for this. What is this in your life? Or think of the way Mordecai in the book of Esther in the Old Testament, the way Mordecai turned to Esther just as she had ascended to her regal position. And Mordecai said to Esther, who knows? Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. That's right. I have 2 or 3 people who are mouthing the words with me. Perhaps you have come to royal dignity for just such a time as this. I have not come to royal dignity, but I have come to a place of dignity. At this moment, you have come to a place of dignity at this transitional moment in your life. And we each raise the question, for what is this our time? We have each arrived, and I want to say this gently and respectfully, we have each arrived at a season of maturity. We're no longer spring chicks, and that's a good thing. Though we no longer have the advantages of youth, we have the wisdom of experience. Please remember, there is so much of life ahead. I love the memory. Karen and I were vacationing down in Savannah, and we were walking through that downtown area of Savannah. You've been there. And there are those beautiful green garden squares in the middle of Savannah. And we were walking past one, and Karen noticed a bench. She said, I think this is the bench where they filmed Forrest Gump. Remember when he was waiting on the school bus? She said, I think this is the one. And lo and behold, as if on cue, as soon as she said that, here comes this dapper gentleman walking down the sidewalk. He was probably 80 years old. He had the sharpest, the coolest sport coat and bow tie on. He was clearly not a tourist. And so I stopped him, I introduced myself, and I said, are you from around here? He said, oh, yes. I said, well, my wife and I were wondering, is this the bench? He said, yeah, this is it. So we started chatting about Savannah. He had been there forever, and we talked for a good while. And then finally, toward the end of this conversation, I asked him the simple question. I said, so, have you lived here all of your life? I shall never forget his answer. He said, not yet. How beautiful is that? Not yet. We have seasons to live. We have chapters to write in this time of maturity. Now, an aside. I am not a big fan of the word retirement. Retirement comes out of the 16th century. It was originally a French word of exactly the same spelling that meant an act of retreating, of falling back, an act of withdrawing into seclusion. That is what the original meaning of retirement was. And that is so not what we are about. Our focus is not on retreating, but advancing. Our focus is not on withdrawal, but engaging. This is hardly where's Leslie? I was afraid Leslie has left the building. This is, you used the word earlier, Leslie, so I referred back to you. This is hardly the end of the concert. This is the encore. Elvis has not left. We are still singing away. It is well documented that the age of retirement at 65 was designated in 1935 with the passage of the Social Security Act. And of course, I've always found it ironic and somewhat amusing that in 1935, the average lifespan was 61. So a number never got to 65, which was the age of retirement. But now the average lifespan is almost 80. And statistically, for anyone who is today 65 years old, they have a better than average chance of living more than 20 more years. So the way things are going, the encore is going to be longer than the concert. So let's move on. What do we need to do to maximize our encore years? Let me begin with the basics, and we'll get to the word purpose in a few minutes. You are recording this, and I'm sorry, I just keep strolling. I'm sorry.
I keep panning.
Very good. We begin by taking care of ourselves. If we are going to be healthy, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, we begin by taking good care of ourselves. We begin, in other words, by laying a solid foundation. If we don't take excellent care of ourselves, then we are not going to enjoy these years, and we're going to have very little that we will therefore be able to bring in terms of making a difference in our world. We need to take good care of ourselves, and that's just something that a lot of people just don't do. As I have heard it said, if most of us loved our neighbor as we loved ourselves, we'd be arrested. When I think of healthy self-care, I think of that wonderful Arthur Brooks, that wonderful book, Keep Sharp. The book by Sanjay Gupta. That's right, the Arthur Brooks book is the one that you'll be doing your study on. Keep Sharp by Sanjay Gupta. He outlines the 5 ways we build the foundation for the rest of our lives. And as we mature in years, we've got to take more and more care of this, because our aging bodies are not going to serve us as our youthful bodies did. The 5 keys toward taking good care of ourselves, and again, Sanjay's a neurologist, he knows what he's talking about here, are a healthy diet, regular exercise, plenty of sleep, a sense of purpose, good relationships, and I would add a vibrant spiritual life. Now, of course, Sanji lives here in town, and if I ever meet Sanji, I'm going to tell him three things. Number one, thank you for writing the book. I really value it. Number two, all 5 points that you made in your book are exactly what my mother taught me in 1955. But number three, my mother knew what was important, but she was not a neurologist. She did not know why it was important. And you explained to me why. That lays the foundation. I encourage us to begin there. But it is simply the foundation on which we will build. Now, as we look to what this new chapters of our life, this new season of our life is going to contain, where do we go from here? As Arthur Brooks wrote in From Strength to Strength, this is the book that Steve is going to be highlighting in his study on October 19th, I believe it is. Arthur Brooks wrote, these words are just beautifully expressed. When you are young, you have raw smarts. When you are old, you have wisdom. When you are young, you can generate lots of facts. When you are old, you know what they mean and how to use them. As we say in my profession, that'll preach. That is wisdom. When you are young, you have lots of facts. When you are old, you know what they mean and how to use them. We play to the strengths of our age. He describes how we all lose that problem-solving flexibility that he refers to as fluid intelligence, the first types of life, and we replace it with what he calls crystallized intelligence, and that is wisdom, discernment, acuity, insight. At our ages, we have wisdom like never before. How will you use the wisdom of your years? How will you, for what is this your moment? For what is this your time? Let me share with you 5 touchstones. As I say, I am approaching my retirement. I'll retire at the end of April 26. These are the touchstones that I am applying to my life. The first touchstone is I plan to be intentional about how I will live this next chapter. As none other than, and you knew I was going to quote her, of course, as none other than Dolly Parton said. I love this quote. Find out who you are and then do it on purpose. We don't tend to drift into living life purposefully. And we don't tend to drift into living out of our deepest and finest selves. We do it with intentionality. It must be intentional. Here to me is the intentional process. Here's the outline. If I'm intentional about something, I begin with 4 words. Discern, discover, decide, do. Discern. Discern who you are and what you want to be about. Then discover what has been revealed. Decide intentionally how you're going to engage it, and then do it. It was once written, everything changed the moment he realized he had just enough time to do what was important. This is the time in our lives to maximize our focus, to maximize our intentionality. Just enough time. Remember I said if you're 65, then you, on average, have more than 20 years of a lifetime left. Some of us are trying to remember when we were 65. Just enough time to do what is important. Just enough time to be intentional about how I live the rest of my life. I think of the posting, which I just love. I am so with it. I was on social media. I saw the neatest posting. It was a photograph of 3 horses running as fast as they could possibly gallop. And the caption at the top of the photograph says, "Live your life like somebody left the gate open." That's how I want to live the rest of my life. I want to ask myself, what is important to you? And how will I engage it? Who is important to me? How will I show it? Now, we will have plenty of time to spend with our spouses, with our adult children, with a grand or 2 or several. Time to travel, time for good books. But beyond these givens, there will be discretionary time. Retired from so many responsibilities, now involved, now engaged in what really matters at this point in our lives. Now, as you decide what you're going to do with the discretionary time, let me encourage you to have a balance between fun and purpose. Research shows the importance of including both in our lifestyle. It's referred to, the Greeks referred to it in ancient times as hedonic well-being and eudaimonic well-being. Well-being. Hedonic well-being is pleasure-seeking. That is laughter, good times, avoiding any discomfort. Eudaimonic well-being is virtue-seeking. Pleasure-seeking as opposed to virtue-seeking. This one goes deeper. Eudaimonic goes deeper. It's purposeful. Giving back. Making a difference. Developing a sense of mastery. And developing and engaging in deep personal relationships. We need both. Hedonic and eudaimonic. They overlap, but they're different. And clearly the latter aspiration is the one that runs deeper. And its impact, and this is the reason I emphasize it, because its impact on our emotional well-being is far longer lasting. Doing those things that are substantive, either engaging in those kinds of activities that are substantive and making a difference, or engaging in those relationships and developing those relationships that run deep and are profound. That's what's longer lasting. But again, we need both. We need the fun and games, and we need the purpose and relationship. And we need those to be in balance. Today we're going to focus on the purpose and developing that purpose in our lives. So again, my first point to me is I want to be intentional. I want to be intentional about how I live the rest of my life. To listen for that voice that discerns the will of God for me at this moment of my life. First discern, then discover, then decide, then do it. Next, and I have certainly implied this one, I want to live with purpose and meaning in my life. This is what I want my intentionality to be about. That my life stood for something. I want intentionally to live out my God-given purpose And in living out my God-given purpose, I will discover my life's meaning. Okay, there's a link, a very important link between purpose and meaning. Let me make the connection. Purpose. Purpose is to have an inspired, resolved clarity of direction. Meaning. Meaning, then, is the quality of fulfillment derived from having followed that purposeful direction. Purpose is cognitive. Meaning is emotional. Purpose is cognitive. Purpose is focused on the values I choose to live out my life, and it's focused on the way, the involvements in which I engage and focus those values. Then, having engaged in those purposes for my life, the day-to-day and the big purpose for which I take on commitments, having engaged those two, then I experience a quality of life, I experience a quality that we call meaning. The discovery of purpose is followed by life's meaning. I rarely meet someone, and this is very important to me, I rarely meet someone who has a fulfilled life without a clarity of direction. And I rarely meet someone who has an empty life without a lack of purpose and direction. I cannot emphasize how important it is to intentionally claim those purposes for our lives at which we are going to invest the rest of our lives. And so living with sights set and paths chosen is at the core of a meaningful, fulfilled life. Helen Keller put it so well. She wrote, "Many persons have a wrong idea of what constitutes true happiness." And her true happiness is what I mean by meaning. It is not attained through self-gratification, but through fidelity to a worthy purpose. So meaning comes from living out our purpose in ways large and small, discerning the paths that are our chosen direction. We will find our purposes in many ways, some deeper than others. But the purposes that we will discover that will run the deepest are those that will make a difference beyond ourselves. The purposes we will discover that will be most profound and most lasting in terms of the meaning they bring to us is going to be making a difference and caring about those around us. How often have we heard people say after a day of service, "I know I got far more from that day than those I went to serve." Say amen, church. Amen. That is because we committed ourselves to our purpose. And our purpose, whatever the venture was that day, our purpose was to care. And we went and we cared and we received far more than we had offered, far more than they did. It is the meaning we find at the deeper level from fulfilling our purpose. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. For me, to be purposeful is to be spiritual, is to seek my highest calling, God's urging in my life. It is to be prayerful. It is to go to a substantive spiritual place. For we are guided by a spirit we trust, and we are led by life lessons of our Christian faith on which we rely and on which we build as we develop our purposes. So our faith gives us guidance and direction toward our purpose. And then our purpose gives us fulfillment and meaning. As we said, there will be plenty of fun and games. We need to count on our lives to make a difference in our community, our family, our church, our relationships, and ultimately within ourselves. We cannot fly on automatic pilot. One of the ways I think of it is as I write the chapters of my life, I want there to be very few blank pages. Paul wrote, "The goal I pursue is God's upward call in Jesus Christ." The goal I pursue is God's upward call. I want to be doing what I discern to be an inspired upward call, to which I felt a nudge, or a tug, or an inspiration, or even a calling. Well, let me move along here. When I think of the discovery of purpose, I think of it in two ways. Boots on the ground at 30,000 feet. Boots on the ground. How the purpose of how I live day by day in living out my values. That's one of my purposes, is to be focused on what matters to me, on the values I claim, and to live them out. And number two, or the bigger is the 30,000 feet, the involvements in which I choose to be a part of. Those big, the programs, the volunteer opportunities, those ways that I commit myself, along with so many of you. That's the second way that I think of the discovery of purpose. To what do I want to commit myself to? What involvements? But let's begin with the day-to-day living. That's where I claim the values. I'm going to mention this only briefly because I have written about this in the writing I've done on integrity. To claim my values. By what am I going to live each day? What are the values that are going to guide me in every interaction with everyone I see in that day? What are the principles? To what do I aspire in those relationships and how I live out my life? Let me give you a great example of this. She did not advertise this fact, but Ron Greer, every morning, after she woke up, before her feet hit the ground, hit the floor, she offered a prayer. She asked that God would guide her to be her very best self, her very finest self that day. I want to live with that kind of purpose. I want to live with that kind of focus. I want to live out my values and live as my very finest self on this day. You're sitting with a friend in the waiting room at Showa Hospital. Her son is in surgery. They're operating on his heart. You came to be with her through the day. The two of you get your cup of coffee, you sit there and you chat about anything but what's going on down that hall. Finally, there's a moment of quiet. She reaches over, she picks up her iPad, and you open your book, and each of you begin to read. After a little while, you look over at your friend, and her eyes are brimming with tears. And she says, I am so scared. And you say to her, of course you are. And you reach over and you squeeze her hand and you say, that's why I am here for you. tell me about it. That is why you came. You are living purposefully. Your loving compassion took you to that waiting room. Your loving compassion had you reach over and take her hand. Your loving compassion invited her to pour out her heart. If we are going to live purposefully, we begin with boots on the ground. What are the values that I've chosen? And before you walked in that waiting room, you chose compassion. And you lived it. That's the first way we live purposefully, is we choose what our values are and we live those values out. You gave her a gift, and then you also loved the gift because you had achieved your life's purpose, and that then gave you meaning in your own life. You came to care. You wrote the next page of the story of who you are. I want to live with purpose in each day of my life. Now let me go through this quickly. And then, after having claimed my values, then I want them to become my virtues. Let me clarify between the two. Values and virtues. Values are principles and ideals I hold in high regard. Virtues are principles and ideals I hold in high regard and have integrated into my living. My values are what I believe. My virtues are what I live. To believe in courage is a value. To be courageous is a virtue. As we purposefully engage our lives, we translate each of our values day to day, moment to moment, step by step, into the virtues in our lives. Now, let's move on. The first purposeful activity that we take in every phase of our lives is going to be we purposefully decide what our principles are, what is going to guide us, what our values are. And then secondly, and here I'm more focused on my retirement years, I want to plan proactively the specific involvements, pursuits, and ventures to which I will purposefully give myself, devote myself in these coming chapters of my life. To what do I want to commit? And how do I do that? I think there are two elements in committing myself to involvements and purposes. And both of them are contained in Frederick Buechner's quote that ironically Bill Greer quoted in his sermon last week. Frederick Buechner said, "The place God calls you is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep hungers meet." Where your gladness and the world's hungers meet. My two agendas then in seeking the involvements in my retirement years, my encore years, my two agendas are, one, to find where the world's hungers are. And secondly, to spot, to sense, to feel where I resonate with those that speak to me, where I resonate within my heart. There has to be that kind of chemistry, the need the world brings and the resonance I have for that particular need. Regarding resonance, Joseph Campbell years ago put it so beautifully. He said, "Follow your bliss. When I look to the world's needs, where is the bliss that I follow?" Stay fresh. Stay current. Stay in touch with where your heart is taking you. It means connecting with our center, connecting with our core. It always involves, well, how nice. These are two nice ladies. I mean, that boy needs a place to put his nose. Are you ready for your takeaway today? You found what everybody's undivided. It's what I call, when you're looking for what is your purpose? What is your purpose? It's what I call the Jimmy V litmus test. Remember Jim Valvano? Jim Valvano was the head basketball coach at NC State. Wonderful basketball coach and even a fine man. He was remarkable. Jimmy V had the most beautiful way of saying it. He said, and this is basketball. He said, you got 3 seconds left in the game. Your team is 1 point behind, and you get the ball. Immediately you call timeout. See, that's why I needed my hands for the timeout. You call timeout. Your team comes over and they huddle up around you. This is the way Valvano put it. He said, you look in each of their faces. And in those 5 faces, you're going to see one of 2 expressions. On some of their faces, you're going to see, give me the ball, coach, give me the ball. And on other faces, you're going to see, I don't want that ball. You ready? Anytime an opportunity is presented to me, I listen, I run it through my Jimmy V litmus test. I listen to my heart. Do I hear, give me the ball? Or, I don't want that ball. Leslie, I'm not sure how I worded it when you asked me to come here for this talk today. Not sure how I worded it, but what I thought was, give me the ball. With each of those opportunities that comes your way, if a friend is talking to you about an involvement they're engaged in that's really making a difference in the community or making a difference in an individual's life, and you wonder, is that me? Would that be me? Listen. What do you hear? Give me the ball. Or, not that one. That's my litmus test. Present. I pause. I step back. In quiet reflection, as each of these opportunities come by me, who am I in this moment of my life? And what is my life to be about? I look at myself, the abilities that I bring. I look at how I felt in the past. Is I still alive? Or I look at moments that have touched me. Does it touch me now? I look at what I've done that has given me joy. Do I still resonate there? I listen to those needs others have discovered to see if we're kindred spirits or perhaps not. Our deep gladness may well have changed over the years. And that's the kind of thing to which we need to be respectful. What are my interests now? Sometimes they will just come out of the blue. I had one of those experiences that turned out to be, for me, very moving. I was reading an article years before about a couple who were volunteering at an inpatient hospice facility in Cobb County. And I read the article. That's interesting. It's interesting. And then it was months, if not years later. For some reason, I think it was spiritual. For some reason, the thought crossed my mind, I bet there are people down here at Atlanta Hospice when it was still there. I bet there are some people who are at hospice who love to read as much as I do, but can no longer read. Either because of the medication, we've got several physicians here, either because of the medication that they are on, or the fact that they are just that close to their own death. I bet they might enjoy having somebody come by and read to them. So I went down to Atlanta Hospice and I met the lady who headed up their volunteers. And I said, I know you have lots of volunteers doing a lot of wonderful things, the way they serve the residents and all that. I'm interested in doing absolutely none of those. She couldn't have been nicer. I said, let me tell you what I am interested in doing, and please tell me no if you're not. I would love to read to your patients, to your residents, rather. And she said, we'd love to have you. And so every other Thursday afternoon, I would spend the afternoon at Atlanta Hospice, and they would designate the rooms with the residents that they thought would be most interested. And I had my iPad loaded with stuff, literature. And it was interesting, very few wanted scripture. And I don't think this will shock any of you. The men wanted sports, and the women wanted poetry. That's how I fell in love with Mary Oliver. Her poetry was just magnificent. And so I would go from room to room. They had no idea who I was. I was not a minister. I was not a pastoral counselor. I was not their professional. I was there because I listened to a call. I listened to that urge. I listened to that nudge of where I felt called at that moment in my life. And room after room, I would sit there and I would read to these people who were dying. And then I would sit. Sometimes we would talk. Sometimes we would just sit for several moments of silence. But just be in each other's presence so that we're not alone. Find your calling. Find your calling. Find what inspires you. Of all the options out there, find where you resonate. It's time to wrap up. I have so made this point in several different times. My next touchstone is I want to make a loving difference in the lives of others, just as you do. We want to give back. I have been blessed out of my mind with the life that I have lived. And I want to say thank you by doing my best to be a blessing. I have been loved, I want to be loving. I've been blessed, I want to be a blessing. I have received grace, and I want to live gracious. It's heartfelt expressions of the gratitude we feel we want to give back. So let me flip on through here. Let me tell you, I came loaded for bear. Yes. Next, purpose does not come in sizes. Ready? You don't have to memorize the quote, but memorize the idea. Susan Salzberg, the author, wrote, few people are powerful enough, persuasive enough, or charismatic enough to change the world all at once. But all of us can make a difference in the 3 feet around us. That's what we look for. We look for our purpose. We're not trying to transform the world. We're trying to touch a heart. And when I think of touch, I always go back to the way Jesus phrased it. We've done it to the least of these, you've done it to me. When I have touched the heart, if I have touched the heart of someone successful, I've touched the heart of our God. Moments don't get more sacred than that. Next, I plan to live in the present and savor each present relationship. We learn from the past, we plan for the future, but we live in the present. We savor each relationship, we savor each moment and each relationship in our lives. I don't want to be living too much in the past with regrets or longings to go back there. I don't want to live too much in the future with my plans or my anxieties, because both of those will rob me from living in the present moment and the sheer joy in that. And I want to enjoy and savor each of the present relationships in my life. I want to use the awareness. Let me tell you something that's interesting. You have heard the phrase, it's corny, but we've heard it all of our lives. You never hear a dying man say, I wish I'd put in more hours of work. Okay? My question is, what do you hear dying persons say? Are you ready? It's not about heaven. It's not about theology. It's not about their accomplishments. It's not about their success. What dying people talk about are relationships. They talk about their spouses. They talk about their parents. They talk about their children. They talk about their grandchildren with photographs. And they talk about their friends. They talk about relationships. I use that awareness to guide me with what really matters in my living of my life. What matters, along with my relationship with God, is my relationship with each of you. Is my relationship with those I care about, with those who mean the most to me. And I want to spend purposefully the rest of my life savoring those relationships. So, how should we live this new season? How do I best live my life? How do I live my best life? How do I live my life best? Can't run anymore. Can't play golf worth a flip. This new season will be different. I've traded in the pluses of youth for the advantages of experience. I am inspired by those who go before me. I think of Neil Selinger. Neil Selinger was a New York attorney. He retired in his mid-50s so he could do what his heart told him he wanted to do. He tutored at his local high school. He served once a week at the food pantry, and he worked on Saturdays at Habitat for Humanity. And then shortly in his retirement years, he went back to the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence College and began writing his memoir. Not long after that, tragically, he contracted ALS. And Neil Selinger wrote, as my muscles weakened, my writing became stronger. As slowly I lost my speech, I gained my voice. As I diminished, I grew. As I lost so much, I finally began to find myself. Be who you are. Be all that you are. In this new season, play to your new strengths. Play to the wisdom and the compassion and the love that you bring. These are the elements I will include. I want a purpose for which I will discern, discover, decide, and do. I want to live that purpose out with intentionality. I want to give back and make a difference beyond myself. I want to savor each and every present moment. I want to savor each and every precious relationship. Embrace the life that is yours. Affirm it. Enjoy it. Be grateful for it. And in it, make the difference that only you can make. It is a joy to be with you today. Leslie, thank you so much for having invited me.
Don't forget to look for the reading and reflection on October the 19th, and come learn about our new home.
homebound visitation ministry. It's exactly what you were talking about, is going out on a limb and starting new relationships. I think it's going to be so meaningful for the people that participate as well as the people that we visit. But Ron, thank you so much.